College of Management Studies IGNOU presents an audiobook on the course MMPC 003 Business Environment for MBA program. Presenting Block 4 International Business Environment, Unit 12 Foreign Trade, Part 1. After reading this unit, you should be able to define the concept of foreign trade and the need for it, state the advantages and disadvantages of foreign trade, identify the types of trade barriers and the initiatives taken to remove these barriers, and analyze recent trends in India's foreign trade. Introduction. We all exist in a global marketplace. The clothes up in your wardrobe might be designed and made in Italy or China. The car that you own might be from Japan or Korea. The fancy and latest smartphone that you possess might be made in Korea or China or Japan. The toy that you have gifted your child on her 5th birthday might be made in China. The laptop that you are working on might be developed in UK. As an employee, your job might be related to airplanes, cars, computers, farming, machinery or other technology-related industries, such that the major proportion of the sales of your company and your salary in turn gets generated from the exports of such products. In short, we all are connected through foreign trade, which has shown an immense growth in the last few decades. Foreign trade refers to the exchange of goods and services between the countries. In other words, foreign trade simply means imports and exports of goods and services. Export refers to the selling of goods and services out of the country, while import refers to flow of goods and services into the country. From time immemorial, trade has taken place through land and sea routes. Trade helps countries to boost their productivity by concentrating on producing goods in which they are competitive. Trade also helps to increase efficiency of world production under certain conditions. Given the advancement in transport and communication, the dimensions have changed over time. Costs have come down significantly, and thus countries trade more today than they used to even 50 years ago. The progress of trade, however, has been bumpy, with occasional protectionism halting its flow. Currently, the world is going through such a crisis, but the history has shown that trade is one of the vehicles through which world GDP growth can be influenced in the positive direction. Brief historical overview. The exchange of goods and services among people, more commonly the barter system of exchange, is an age-old practice. Several political ideologies evolved since the late Renaissance period and has continued up to World War II and have defined the world trading pattern according to their own beliefs. According to the mercantilists who dominated during the 16th and 18th century, acquisition of wealth in the form of gold by a nation is of utmost importance. A nation can increase as well as benefit from trade only at the cost of other nations' welfare. This led to imposition of price and wage controls, promoting of domestic industries, exports of finalized goods, and imports of raw materials, while limiting the exports of raw materials and imports of finalized goods. A strong opposition against the mercantilist came up towards the latter half of the 18th century in the form of physiocrats, Some French economic thinkers called themselves so as they supported liberalism. They demanded liberty in both production and trade. This led to strong opposition against excessively high and often prohibitive custom duties and tariffs and negotiations of trade agreements with the more powerful foreign countries. A major success of this ideology came in the form of the Anglo-French Trade Agreement of 1860, according to which the French protective duties were lowered to a maximum of 25% within 5 years, along with free entry of all French products except wine in Britain. In the middle of the 19th century, there was an emergence of protectionist measures of trade. The protective custom policies shielded many economies from the foreign competition. The French tariff of 1860, for example, charged extremely high rates on British products, more precisely 60% on pig iron, 40 to 50% on machinery, and near about 600 to 800% on woolen blankets. Transport costs between the two countries were an additional layer of protection imposed. The latter half of the 19th century witnessed Germany to follow systematically protectionist policy, followed by the US raising its duty rates sharply based on the McKinley Tariff Act of 1890. The protectionism in the last quarter of the 19th century weren't much stringent. Quantitative restrictions were null and void, custom duties were low and stable, currencies were freely convertible into gold, lesser issues with balance of payments, and free factor mobility was allowed across borders. Post the World War I, in the first half of the 20th century, trading conditions were dead. World trade disrupted to such an extent from where recovery was almost impossible. It was further followed by the Great Depression of 1930s that witnessed mass unemployment levels, giving rise to mercantilist system of trade through imposition of protective measures. Most of the countries attempted to improve their balance of payments by raising their custom duties, introducing a wide range of import quotas, and imposition of exchange controls, that is, government restrictions on the transactions related to foreign exchange, where purchases involving foreign exchange transactions cannot exceed receipts in foreign exchange. The resurgence of this ideology continued till the end of World War II, post which several trade agreements and newer trading systems emerged to promote free flow of foreign trade. Need for foreign trade. Countries engage in trading internationally when there are not sufficient resources or capacity to satisfy all needs and wants of consumers domestically. By developing and utilizing its own domestic resources, a country can produce goods it is capable of, create surplus, and then trade internationally to buy goods and services from abroad which it is not capable of producing. The concept of foreign trade goes back to almost 10,000 years ago, when there were not much defined modern states and national border concepts. It goes back to the time when ships and pack animals were the only mode of trading among people. The countries today, globally, would not be able to survive without trading internationally. With greater size and increasing population, there is an increase in needs and wants of nations domestically, which a country may not be able to produce given its resource base. Hence, Import and export relations worldwide are an integral part of survival for every economy. Now we know the reason behind exporting of goods by a country. But why does a country go for importing of some goods and services? This question can be answered based on the reasons, which are: Number 1. Price. A country may produce something at a relatively lower price than another country, which may produce it at a higher cost. Number 2. Quality. Every country has its own set of resource base which might differ from other countries, and hence can produce goods it is capable of making by using its own resource base. So if country A can produce product 1 using its own resources and country B produces product 2 in a similar line, they can import goods from each other which will be of much superior quality than had they produced both domestically without trading. Number 3. Availability. Nations are not well equipped to produce all goods and services domestically. Hence, trading is a source of availability of all goods domestically. And number 4. Demand. With increasing population, demand for goods and services increase. Hence, importing of goods become necessary. Advantages and disadvantages of foreign trade. Trading internationally has many advantages, like: Number 1. Economies of scale. When a country produces goods and services, it produces them in surplus. This surplus is being traded internationally. Since higher volumes of goods are being produced, the cost of producing each good is reduced. That is, the country attains economies of scale. Number 2. Comparative advantage. Trading allows countries to specialize in production of goods and services it is capable of producing using its resource base. Number 3. Competition. Selling goods and services internationally boost both the foreign and domestic markets. Domestic suppliers and consumers are aware about the foreign competition in terms of prices and quality of goods, and suppliers would ensure the quality and price of their goods in order to meet the global competition. Number 4. Transfer of technology. Foreign trade enables transfer of technology among countries, especially from a developed to a developing nation. Foreign companies are also approached by the developing nations to set up local manufacturing units and help in infusion of such technologies in the production of local goods. And number 5, more job creating opportunities. Increase in international trading also leads to creation of more job opportunities in both domestic and foreign countries, thereby reducing unemployment rates. However, there are certain disadvantages associated with foreign trade. They are: Number 1. Overdependence adversely affects demand. One of the major cons of trading internationally is exposed to both favorable and unfavorable events globally. Any unfavorable event in the global front may affect the demand for domestic goods and can even lead to higher risk of unemployment and reduced economies of scale. Number 2. Unfair for startups. New startups or companies may not be able to flourish or may not be able to expand both its resources and experience to compete against the bigger foreign firms. Number 3. National security threats. If a country is highly dependent on imports for strategic industries such as food, energy, or military equipment, the country may be forced to take up a decision which might be unfavorable to national interest. And number 4, burden on natural resources. Every economy has a limited resource base, but if it decides to welcome the entry of more foreign companies, the natural resource base may tend to drain faster. Theory of absolute and comparative advantage. Foreign trade is now a global necessity. No country can better off without trading internationally. David Ricardo, an economist and a member of the British Parliament, in the year 1817 argued in his paper, and I quote, "On the principles of political economy and taxation," unquote, stating that free trade and specialization can benefit all trading partners, including a country which happens to be relatively inefficient. To understand this, we need to dive into the concepts of absolute and comparative advantages of trade. Let us take for example that there are two countries, home and foreign, producing two goods, cheese and wine. To keep things simple, we assume that each country has only one factor of production, that is labor. The unit of labor requirements, that is labor hours required to produce a unit of a good, to produce cheese and wine in home country is given by ALC and ALW, while that in foreign is denoted by A*LC and A*LW. One might think that to determine which country will produce cheese and which country will produce wine, all that is needed to be done is to compare their unit labor requirements in production of cheese and wine. If ALC is smaller than A*LC, that is case 1, we can say that the home labor is more efficient in producing cheese than foreign. Similarly, if ALC is greater than A*LC, that is case 2, we say that the foreign labor is more efficient in production of cheese than home. The theory of absolute advantage states that when one country can produce a good with lesser units of a factor of production compared to another country, then the former country is said to have an absolute advantage in the production of that good. In case 1, home country is said to have an absolute advantage in the production of cheese, whereas in case 2, the foreign country is said to have an absolute advantage in the production of cheese. However, in a global scenario, when there are more than two countries engaging in trade, absolute advantage alone is not sufficient in explaining the pattern of trade. The theory of comparative advantage, however, brings in the concept of opportunity cost to determine the gains from trade. A country has a comparative advantage in producing a good if the opportunity cost of producing the good in terms of other goods is lower in that country compared to other countries. The term opportunity cost refers to the amount of one good that is to be forgiven to produce one extra unit of another good. For example, if we want to derive that home is more productive in cheese and less productive in wine than foreign, we can assume a relative comparison of the unit labor requirements for both goods in both the countries in the form ALC divided by ALW is less than A*LC divided by A asterisk LW. That is the first case. Or to be precise, we can also write it as ALC divided by A asterisk LC is less than ALW divided by A asterisk LW. This is case 2. This states that the ratio of the labor required to produce a pound of cheese to that of a gallon of wine is lesser in the home country than that in the foreign. This ratio of labor requirements is nothing but the opportunity cost of producing cheese in terms of wine, and the comparative advantage theory is defined in terms of opportunity cost. So from case 1 and case 2, or equation 1 and equation 2, we can say that home has a comparative advantage in the production of cheese than the foreign. Foreign, on the other hand, will have a comparative advantage in the production of wine than home. And both the countries will gain from trade by exporting the goods in which they are having comparative advantage. Now the question is, does a country benefit from having absolute advantage in all goods? One can only imagine that a country with higher income levels, higher number of skilled workers, technologically advanced equipment, and the latest advanced production processes can have an absolute advantage in all goods. US, for example, have the ability to produce both computers and roses. As roses usually can be grown in the warm temperatures, how hard it might be for US to supply roses in winter, especially in the month of February and on the eve of Valentine's Day. The flowers have to be grown in heated greenhouses, which involve great expenses in terms of capital investment and other scarce resources that are required to grow roses. Those resources could have been put to produce computers. Suppose US grows 1 million roses for sale on Valentine's Day. The resources required to grow those roses could have produced 1 lakh computers. Then the opportunity cost of 1 million roses is 1 lakh computers. Now, if those 1 million roses could instead be grown in South America, it would be extremely likely that the opportunity cost of those roses in terms of computers would be lesser than that in United States. This is because growing roses in South America is easier as it is summer in February rather than winter. On the other hand, South American workers are less productive than their US counterparts in the production of computers, and thus computer production in South America will yield lower computers, let's say 30,000 computers, than it would have been in US. So the opportunity cost of 30,000 computers is 1 million roses. These differences in opportunity cost raise the possibility of mutually beneficial trade agreements between US and South America. Let US stop growing roses completely and produce only computers, while South America shifts its resource base completely in the production of roses than computers. So, with increase in production of computers by US and that of roses by South America, there is an increase in the world's economic pie, which in turn also leads to increase in standard of living. Thus, it can be concluded that even if a country has the ability to produce all goods, it can still benefit from trading with other countries as a result of comparative advantage. You were listening to the audiobook by the School of Management Studies IGNOU for MBA program. Course Code MMPC 002 Human Resource Management. Course Coordinator Professor Nayantara Padhi from School of Management Studies, IGNOU. Voiceover by Harpreet Kaur. Edited by Jagbandhu Jana. Program assisted by Tarannum Jahan. Program produced by Dr. Manoj Kumar Singh. This program was brought to you by Electronic Media Production Center of Indira Gandhi National Open University.